As I began to put this video together, even though it wasn't one of my initial goals, I realized a lot of people had some great stories about demerits and about Jug. And so I put together this short piece on different stories and recollections that people had about their experiences with Jug. Hope you enjoy it.
One of the funny stories was Jim Shortle and I, God bless Jim, is gone. Jim he and I used to get into it, and it was all good natured. But so one time he got in my locker and took something. So I started chasing him down the hall. We turned the corner, and I'm at the one corner. He's already turned it, and I hear, "Hey, babe, give me your card." He ran right into Evie Dunn. And it was so satisfying to me after he had been giving me this grief that he ran into Evie Dunn and he got jugged. And I just turned around and walked the other way.
Believe it or not, I didn't get jugged very often. When I did, Chuck Conway always took really good care of me. I only had to memorize, the tale of Sleepy Hollow once. For the most part, as I worked every day at either the bookstore or at the bookstore and at the switchboard, for $1 an hour off tuition. That was, even back then, that was for crap. Anyway, and then I did some stage crew stuff. So Chuck Conway always just said, "Look, you're working here every day anyway, just go to work." So he kind of let me out of that for the most part, with a little bit of a, you're better than this, unless it was something that was an idiotic jug, in which case he would not mention that part.
Well, the one, I'll tell you what, and it's a funny story. I think, and I cannot recall if it was junior or senior year, but if you recall, we had a jukebox in the cafeteria, and it got to be kind of a custom that at least once every day, Jefferson Airplane, Somebody to Love would play. And whoever was in charge of the jukebox took that song out. And so word of mouth went around that we weren't going to leave the cafeteria until that song was played. And so everybody just stayed put, even after they'd eaten their lunch. They might have had to study for a test, but everybody was still there. And then word started passing around out in the halls what was going on. And we were sitting at our table, the usual group. Everybody unofficially had your table. It was always reserved unofficially. And we were sitting there, and all of a sudden we saw Mr. Conway come in the little door of it. He had his jaw set. He looked around, gave a quick analysis of the situation, walked right over to our table and asked Steve Bischoff for his demerit card. And Steve gave it to him, and as Mr. Conway was marking it, the whole sit-in broke up, and everybody just started heading for the door. And Mr. Conway saw that, and that was fine. So the only guy to go to Jug for that was Steve. And I think the guy, he had some of the worst luck with Jug of anybody. He one time accidentally set off the fire alarm, and I think for that he actually even was officially, if you might say, suspended and did not get exempted from any finals that year because of that. But it was, to me, it was just like, wow, some protesters we are.
Senior year, Conway caught me and a close friend of mine skipping school. It was our 13th time that year, but it was the first time he caught us. And he was so happy, but he did give us a week's worth of jugs. But what he did every night that we were doing that, everybody else had gone, he would bring us hamburgers and fries and a Coke or a malt. He fed us every night.
And I didn't really study. much at St. Louis U High, and did a lot of my homework, in the car on the way to school in the morning, and stuff like that. But I wasn't too smart about it. So in junior year, Ebby Dunn was our homeroom teacher, and he was also teaching the math class right after homeroom. So I would try to come in and during homeroom finish the math homework that was due the next period. But the way the desks were set up, my desk was right in front of his desk, of the big desk in the front. So he could see me trying to finish the homework. That's the dumb part of me. But anyway, one day, he called on me immediately as soon as class started, and of course I didn't have the answer. I hadn't gotten that far, and he said, Troy, outside, and he took me out into the hallway, and he reamed me up and down for, it was probably only 3 minutes, but it seemed like 10. And that's the infamous quote, they're going to have to take both of us to the hospital to get my foot out of your ass. And what I remember so well from it was, out of the corner of my eye, I had to, stare at him. And I was quite a bit taller than he was by that point. So I'm looking down at him, or he's looking up at me with steam coming out of his nose. But I could see out of the corner of my eye, classrooms up and down the hall, the instructors would come to the door and close it, so that they didn't have to hear Ebby ream me out so bad. So I got jugged for that. But Ebby was so weird. He jugged me, and so I'm in Conway's office, writing out one of those chemistry equations and stuff. And Ebby sticks his head in the door, and is all smiles and and friendly, like, hey, I hope you have a good night, and blah blah blah, isn't it a beautiful afternoon, kind of thing. And I'm thinking, the way you talked to me earlier in the day, I would think, we should stay away from each other for a month or so.
He said the first time I got jugged as a freshman, I don't know why I got jugged, but you got to Conway's office and he gave me a page of Latin, a full 8x11 page of Latin I had to memorize. And I thought, there's no way. And I'm sitting in that room looking, he's trying to memorize it, watching the sun go down until the lights are going out, people are leaving. And he finally said, all right, you can go. And I don't think I had anything memorized either. But that's, that was the first one. And that really was influenced me. I don't have to go back and try to memorize any more Latin again. So
another jug I got, another jug was for riding a tricycle into the wall, like laughing, because we were working on the senior follies, and it was into the evening. 5 or 6 o'clock, and finishing up, and so we did have a tricycle, and I was just riding it up and down the halls on the second floor. And turned and ran into a wall, and then of course tipped the tricycle over on the ground. But just as I did that, some Jesuit, and I can't remember who it was, turned the corner and saw me, and jugged me for tricycle riding.
In my 4 years at St. Louis U High, I never got jugged.
It was interesting, Wayne, because we were the last parade. We were also the last bus trip to Kansas City. And I remember that trip too, because I mentioned Steve Saliga went to grade school with him. We've been friends since kindergarten. Grew up in the same neighborhood, and so we were roommates. And so I remember when we all met at in the gym before we left, and they said, "Okay, when we get there, don't go east of the hotel because that is a bad section of town, and there's strip clubs and there's bars." And of course, that was going to be the first place we were going to go. But I remember we were up in our room, and we had the windows were the old kind that slid open, right? Remember, I don't know if you remember, but people were sticking their heads out the window looking around, and Saliga and I got phone books and we tried to drop to hit people. And about 10 minutes later, we get a knock on the door, and it was Mr. Keefe. And he came in and said, "I counted the windows and the floors. I know you guys were doing this. Give me your demerit cards." And he goes, I'm doubling whatever you have. And I had like 18 demerits. I was always getting in trouble. So I went from 18 to 36 in just one, and I had 3 jugs to do. And, once again, you mentioned, I mean, Mr. Conway was great because he kind of let me off or whatever. But that was memorable. So
there, you bring up Conway. There, to me, now you were probably a goody two shoes and didn't get in any trouble, but I got in a little trouble. I got a few jugs. I did some things. I'm a kind of a smart ass anyway. He was the most feared man at St. Louis U High in our day for me. I don't know if he was for you, but Chuck Conway with those little beady eyes looking out of those wire rim glasses, and he wouldn't say anything. "Mr. Milford, what did you do?" And then he wouldn't say another word. It's like one of those techniques that interrogators use to get you to talk. They just are silent and they look at you. And then you have to spill your guts. And he'd say, "Memorize this 4-page chemistry brochure and come back to me when you got it done." And I'll go, "Oh, I don't want to do that."
And he had those chemistry books that you had to read and memorize pages. Well, I finally figured out that whether you memorize them or not, you can memorize them if you want to and try to get out early, or you can just sit there till it's time to go because he wanted to go home too.
There's no favorite Jug story. There is no favorite Jug story. Jugs were torturesome. And Conway, I feared that man. He was so in the know. He was like a part of the CIA. He knew everything that was going on, and he struck fear in my heart. And later I hear people that went down to St. Louis U, he was down there, and turned out he was a great guy, but I never knew that. But I can remember being in Jug several times, but the one that kind of sticks out of my mind was we were told to memorize the reproductive systems of rhesus monkeys in Latin. Needless to say, about 11:30 at night, we got out of there.
I was probably Jug. I mean, Gettleman at the freshman year level had the world record. I think he needed a second card after 8 jugs, I think it was. There were probably 40 marks. And, and he's my second cousin, so I would just, "Gats, what are you doing?" "Well, I said this to the guy and he took it wrong," and he was the best smart ass of the freshman class. But "Give me your card, sir," they'd always say. "Give me your card." And then he wouldn't have the right tennis shoes for PE class or something, didn't have white socks. They had so many damn rules.
In my entire career there, I think I had 1 jug. And, I was in that group of people who were like, if you don't get a jug during your 4 years, at least one, you're abnormal, right? So I don't remember what I did or who I did it. I mean, my guess is that it was something that I pulled on the chemistry teacher, Mr. Smith. He's such a great guy. And I love that toupee that he had.
It wouldn't have been a true experience if you'd never been jugged. I mean, what's that like? Although you, Wayne, you never probably were. You were the perfect, the model student.
Nothing really outstanding. I do remember sophomore year, I got a lot of demerits. Had to go to jug often, and when I was getting close to 40, I was talking to Tom Gettleman. He says, "Oh, I just lose my card when I get about 30 or 35, because if you got 40, you got suspended." So I thought, okay, so I start losing my card a couple times.
My worst jug was senior year. Well, the most embarrassing one. A bunch of us had Pascalucci as a Russian teacher, and he was just the coolest guy. We absolutely loved him. And we knew where he lived because I don't know if he had shown us his apartment or whatever. And we thought it would be a cool joke one Saturday night to drive by his house and let the air out of his tires. He had some little sports car. So anyway, I think it was Cordum and myself, I think Phil Schaefer, possibly Bob Lloyd, who wasn't a Russian student, but, oh, he'll love it. He'll think this is really funny. So we go out there and we're he had an apartment down near Hampton and Arsenal or somewhere like that. And so we go in the alley, we say, there's his car, his sports car, and we start letting out the air of the four tires. And then a dog starts barking or something like that. And we see the light in his apartment go on, and we all jump in the car and are laughing, and we rush away. Lucci either had extremely good eyesight or he had a pair of binoculars, picks up the license plate, checks with Charlie Conway, and calls us in one by one after they find out who those rascals were. And we had a jug, and one Saturday, and it was like 6 hours, they opened up the trophy case and by the front entrance, and we had to clean the effing trophies one by one. Worst jug ever. We had to go apologize to Pascalucci, and in essence, he didn't rain any terror down on us. It was just one of those things.
First of all, if you hadn't got, and I'm embarrassed that I didn't know that you never got into demerit. Or had I known that, I would have made you part of our carpool, and we would have come to pick you up, and we would have been late, but we would have been late anyway. We just would have been later. And then if we were really late, we would have gotten that automatic 5 spot that we all got, and it was the automatic jug. And you could have gone from not only having a demerit, but a jug all in one. You could have checked all the boxes, Wayne. I don't have a favorite jug story. Most of mine with Conway, frankly, most of mine, Martini and Kiplinger were in there because they were in the carpool with me. And the other one who seemed to always be in there was Rogers. And all I was doing was being entertained by Rogers. And it was just, it certainly was not punishment. I didn't have anything where I had to go, any physical labor. Most of the time I just sat in the room and I shot the breeze with all the other knuckleheads that were in there. And then eventually Conway, I guess, wanted to go home. So he said, okay, everybody out of here. But I don't think I ever memorized what I was supposed to memorize to get out of there.
I really don't. I mean, I was in jug a number of times, but I think I don't remember ever being able to memorize that crap. I mean, it was worse than reading Russian when I was a freshman. I just couldn't do it. And so I would kind of wait Conway out, because if you were there for 3 hours, he finally said, just get out of here. And that happened to me a couple of times.
I think I can count my demerits on one hand until the second half of my senior year, and then I got jugged like 5 times.
So the number one jug story, and I had a lot of them. As a matter of fact, I learned more Latin in jug than I ever did from Father Kellett. But the one story was I think as most of the guys know, in senior year, I got jugged every week that we had a pep rally because they always ran overtime. And so I called them Father Wayne's wink jugs because they were jugs, but they didn't really hold it against me. But anyway, after the first pep rally, I go into the jug room, and there is a extremely nervous freshman who was being jugged for the first time. I thought he was going to cry. And Mr. Conway walks in, he goes, "Get out of that seat. That's Roger's seat." And this kid ended up just got, so he's all upset. Mr. Conway's trying to calm him down. But yes, I think I have a record for jugs that is certain to stand for perpetuity, because ordinarily they would have kicked me out for the number of jugs, but because most of them were having related to going long at pep rallies, they sort of looked the other way.
They had to be smarter than this, but they would tell him, all right, you've got to finish it by this. And they had to know full well that, A, they're dealing with Rogers and he's not going to, it ain't going to happen. So, you know, why even waste your breath with that? Why just not say, Tim, I'll see you tonight after school and you'll see you in the jug.
Right. I think at least one of them, I think they needed some physical labor. And so this was their way to recruit some physical labor. I know I had baseball practice and I think I had 3 demerits on my card. My friends, one of the other guys hear this, they're going to say, "You suck up." I just was able to avoid trouble usually. And so I'm in the cafeteria and I wrinkled up my paper lunch bag and I was probably 5 feet away from the trash can and I threw it into the trash can. It was an easy shot. If it was a free throw, I would have bounced it off the back of the rim. And it went in there, and I think it might have been Mr. Boss, Bob Boss. He said, "Let me see your card." I said, "Okay, for what?" He said, "Throwing a." Wait, I don't even know what he came up with. So I got jugged, and then so now I'm going to be late to baseball practice. This is ridiculous. And they said, what's my jug? And I actually was terrified of having to memorize stuff. I didn't want to do that. So I didn't mind the physical, but I had to go down to the track a few. So we had to pick all the hurdles up and bring them up into the up the storm because it was late in the year. I don't know. There was probably a week or 2 left in the year. So that was I remember that one. I can't remember the other one.
One of those kids that didn't, there were a number of our colleagues that were always, having their demerit cards filled up. I never really got a lot of demerits. I kind of floated under the radar a lot. The only time I ever got jugged, I got jugged by Bob Voss at Bass. Apparently I was talking during Bass and he didn't like it. So I guess but 1 jug in 4 years for me. So it wasn't, I didn't get to know Mr. Conway as well as some.
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit about him, but Mr. Conway actually was very influential to me. And I mentioned the story about going from 18 demerits to 36. And if you remember, if you had 40 demerits, you got suspended. And when I got back from that Kansas City and I had to do those jugs, he kind of gave me an easy jug to do, but a couple of weeks later, I got up to 39 demerits, and we still had like 3 weeks to go. And Mr. Conway came to me and he said, "Hey, let me see your demerit card." So I gave it to him, and he said, "If you get 1 more, you're going to get suspended." And I said, "Yeah, I know that." And he goes, "I think that would really disappoint your mother if you got suspended, don't you think?" And I said, "I think so." And he goes, "Well, I tell you what," he goes, "I'm going to hold on to this. And if any teacher ask you for your demerit card, tell them Mr. Conway has it." I said, "Okay." And he said, "Look, you got 3 weeks." He goes, I fully expect that no teacher is going to come to me in the next 3 weeks asking for this demerit card." And he goes, "Let's see if we can try not to disappoint your mother." And so I kind of looked at that and I said, the guy cut me a break, and he was doing it not necessarily for me because I was the guy causing the problems, but he was doing it because he knew how it would impact my mother. And, I always liked him for that because he was like, he's doing his job. He didn't have to do it, but he was kind of teaching me that, your actions, you got to live with it, but other people have to live with that as well.
Just for the record, in freshman year, in the infamous egg incident during the homecoming parade out by CBC, the 107 float was jugged for throwing eggs, I think by Father Hagen. However, on Monday, Mr. Conway let us all off. So I can actually say, as several people have alluded, I never was jugged, not once, in all 4 years.